All right, y'all, welcome to the show. So today we're going to talk about Ron DeSanctimonious. Is he done? Is it a wrap? Does he need to call today? We'll give you our answer, but also more importantly, the media's answer, because the media is putting a fork in him. We'll talk about that. We also have Ann Coulter, who's of course, was a right-wing hero for the longest time. Still kind of is, but now she turned on Trump, so they, some of them feel about her. She is just as convinced that Trump can't beat Biden as, say, Cenk Uygur is that Biden can't beat Trump. So I'm going to give you her argument. It's actually really interesting. We'll talk about that. We also have, I'm going to react to 2023's craziest Trump supporters. We got some incredible videos to show you. Some of the things they say are just mind-boggling. And then later on in the show, Bernie Sanders is being blamed for Joe Biden's low approval numbers. I don't even know where to begin with that one. And a hilarious and groveling apology from a conservative commentator who dared to slightly disagree with Trump in the sense that he was initially campaigning for Vivek Ramaswamy. It just shows you how power works on the right. I mean, it sort of shows how power works in general, but certainly with the hierarchy of right-wing politics, it is really something. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into it here. So Ron DeSantis came in second place in Iowa, and there were some polls leading into the caucus that had him in third. So the fact that he came in second is actually not terrible, but the macro picture definitely is terrible because he's polling a distant third place in New Hampshire, which is upcoming next. And it doesn't look like there's much of a path for him to win, especially when you have, Nikki Haley, who's also taking some votes. It's like Nikki and DeSantis are splitting from the same pool of not totally pro-Trump, and Trump's people are totally unified. So even though he came in second, you now have some members of the media, even conservative members of the media, are saying, that's it, wrap it up. For Ron to have any chance at all, these people say he needed to win Iowa, and he lost it by 30 points. So here we go to News Nation, or as I call it, the graveyard of cable news. And we have Chris Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly. Let's watch.
Here he is, historian, author. What do you got for us?
I thought there were going to be 4 or 5 more things.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Man about town,
Yeah,
very tall, loves to pick up a check, sartorial splendor, dogs and kids love him.
There you go.
All right.
To me, this is a worthy exercise in Iowa. I respect all of the people who have voted under those weather conditions. I'm glad Iowa's in the spotlight. Next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, New Hampshire, it's a little bit different. And I'll explain that in a minute. There was never any doubt in my mind that Trump would win the MAGA people in Iowa. I mean, it's his place. And you add to that the fact that Ron DeSantis, who had a shot, is probably the worst campaigner since Herbert Hoover. I put him on a level with Herb. He's a terrible campaigner, DeSantis.
Homie brought up Herbert Hoover like he was, alive and covering politics at the time. Is there anybody in the audience who's like, oh yeah, Herbert Hoover, terrible campaigner? What? But still, he's going after DeSantis, and he's not going to hold back.
He's stiff. He doesn't look like he cares about the folks. He can't get his message across without repeating himself 15 times. He's boring. And in this day and age, you can't be boring. And he is. So he's through. He can go to South Carolina. He can go to Guam. He can go anywhere he wants. He's not beating Trump. Nikki Haley.
We'll get to Nikki Haley in a minute, but look, this is anti-introvert bigotry, bro. That's what this is. This is anti-awkward person bigotry. That's what we're witnessing right now. No, to be fair, yeah, he's right. I mean, he had a moment in the spotlight after the midterms when all of the Trump candidates got draxed, and Ron DeSantis was winning by massive margins in Florida. He had all these headlines, calling him the future, and people saying he's definitely the one. There was a brief moment where he surpassed Trump in the polls for like 17 seconds. And O'Reilly's pointing out, man, he squandered that. To be fair to Ron, I actually think he's correct when he says it was the indictments and the legal cases against Trump that undoubtedly made his numbers skyrocket in the Republican primary. So it's almost like nothing he could do about it. But O'Reilly's also not wrong. Look, if you're awkward and introverted, but you're self-aware of your awkwardness and your introversion, then it can be charming. But Ron is awkward and introverted and not self-aware of those things. He also has never looked comfortable a minute in his life. His face contorts itself into all sorts of bizarre and strange positions. And as he says, he's stiff. He's boring. He has that just monotone, like he talks and you're like, all right, so he's kind of right on DeSantis. Now he's going to get to Haley.
I want to hear your insight into the Haley-DeSantis dynamic as evidenced by what we're watching in real time tonight. Still a way to go. But I do like, on a trivia level, you mentioned Hoover. Can you remember the line of the song, the intro song from All in the Family about Hoover? What did
Gee, I wonder why these guys are not on cable news anymore.
and Edith sing about Hoover?
I can't remember. Glenn Miller, I remember, but I don't remember.
Mr. We could use a man like Hoibert Hoover again.
Hoover now. Okay. Well, that's ridiculous because he led us into the Great Depression and couldn't get us out. But anyway.
That's actually true. And I'm surprised Bill O'Reilly saying that because Herbert Hoover is right in line with his politics, his economic philosophy, deregulation, tax cuts for the rich. That was Herbert Hoover.
With all due respect to Archie and Edith, you can't challenge a monster like Donald Trump with a personality like Ron DeSantis. Can't be done. Now, Nikki Haley, she's going at it in an entirely different way.
He's right about the DeSantis personality thing. He's just not a showman. He was able to trigger the libs and get the right to support him with all of his like gimmicky bills in Florida about being anti-woke. But yeah, personality-wise, it's more like that. And by the way, I was wrong. I actually thought when he became the favorite, I actually thought I overestimated the right-wing voters. I thought to some extent they actually would give a shit about electability. That, especially because in the midterms, the Trump candidates just got destroyed. So that told me they're kind of ready to move on. And so I thought they would give a shit at least a little bit about electability, and DeSantis would be the one. But I was wrong. And the polls actually show they don't care about electability. They care about the show. And Trump gives them the show. And Trump pisses off the people who they hate the most. And so, again, he's right about DeSantis, but this Haley stuff, let's see how bad this is.
Together a coalition of the willing, to quote Bush the Younger. The willing are the people who don't want Trump in the Republican Party, and there are 30% of them. It doesn't matter whether DeSantis beats Haley tonight. The fact that it's so close now is embarrassing for DeSantis. So Haley will be around. She's campaigning for vice president, but because Trump does not like her, I doubt that will happen. But Haley knows she's going to get waxed in South Carolina because that's MAGA country, again. But Haley's a good campaigner. She's got a good message, stable. I'm conservative. I've had enough of Biden. All of that is good.
You think she gets waxed in her home state, or you think she just loses?
I do.
Waxed.
I think she loses by 15 to 20.
Okay. I don't know where the Haley's a good campaigner came from. I have no idea how you can make that point. I don't see it. I don't see it even a little bit. I think she's even more boring than Ron DeSantis is. I think there's no doubt about that. But he does think that she's going to lose in South Carolina. I think that's true as well. The idea that, we'll get together a coalition of the anti-Trump people. But yeah, there's a big problem with that. The big problem with that is there are two of you and one of him. If you haven't consolidated by this point, you're not going to consolidate. So I'll end with a point that Zed Jelani made, which I totally agree with, which is there is a very good chance Trump wins the primary and at some point gets convicted of a felony and he's behind bars, and he could, in theory, win the presidency from behind bars. I think it's more likely he loses once he's behind bars, but it's likely he ends up in prison. And nobody has been direct with these right-wing voters and said to them, point blank period, he's probably going to be in prison. So what are you doing? What are you doing? Instead, they're still doing what they did in 2016. Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio sniping at each other while Trump was running away with it. DeSantis and Haley sniping at each other as Trump is running away with it. History repeats itself, man. History repeats itself. And I'll be damned if it doesn't look exactly like it looked back then.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.